And now, Chapter 19 of The Last Boy on Earth, The Wizard's Tale. Tonight was the night they would attempt to contact Radio Ukraine. They needed the generator running at full capacity, and Joe hoped that the atmospheric conditions would be ripe for generating skip, the ability of waves to bounce from the high atmosphere back down to the curved surface of the Earth, enabling communication that would otherwise be impossible in a straight line. This only happened at night when the Earth was facing away from the sun and the ionosphere lowered significantly. They would broadcast their message over and over every 2 minutes, hoping for a response. Until then, though, they had time enough to imagine the ramifications of their actions. If they could make contact, they would no longer be alone. Each one of them had experienced the singular exclusion from all others, feeling totally isolated in the world, and each of them had also experienced the surprising joy of being with another living, breathing person again. To each of them, the idea of reconnecting with other humans seemed the zenith of their hopes. To know that others knew of your existence was as necessary as food, water, shelter, and warmth. It was an affirmation of life. Brady and Kaylee had already discovered that Joe was disabled. He had been an engineer at the paper mill in Old Town, but before that he had been in the Air Force during the Korean War, where he'd been a flight engineer on a B-29. He'd been married and was the father of 3 grown children, but they had all died of the virus, or so he speculated. His diabetes wasn't his only problem. He already had 2 mild heart attacks, and diabetes was slowly making his legs useless and his eyes blind. Even with insulin, his blood sugar spiked and fell wildly. Now that there was no medical care, Joe knew his days were numbered. He was waiting to expire, to lie down at night and never awaken. But since the arrival of Kaylee and Brady, he had found a new purpose. His workshop was full of electronic and mechanical projects that were in various states of completion. He had a full metal shop and enough supplies to last a year. The radio room was also the living room, and he had a large flat-screen television that acted as his computer's monitor. When the generator was running, Joe started his system, and the room began to glow with the faint light of electronics. His computer was attached to the ham radio, which showed up on the large screen. There was a large array of hard drives, and Joe showed them all the data he had saved. I backed up all the databases I could when I knew that the virus was a pandemic. The internet was sketchy at best during the final days, but I managed to download a terabyte of data. I have frequency charts and call signs from all over the world. I could translate almost any language, and I have the whole planet here in mapping software. In the last days, after my wife passed away, I was depressed, but I kept myself busy. I've always kept supplies living out in the country like I do. I don't like going to town more than a few times a year, except for the essentials. All of my medicine came to me in the mail 4 months' worth at a time. I had high-speed internet and satellite TV. That was good because the satellite channels were sporadic, but from time to time I got the live news feeds, and day by day the sound of the outside world grew increasingly quiet. And then the last news report came on the radio, of all places. It was a national public radio broadcast after the internet went down. I recorded it. You want to hear it? Kaylee certainly did. She had been a prisoner in the hospital during the final days and only knew what she and Brady had gathered from the various papers they'd found. Joe turned on an old reel-to-reel recorder and rewound the tape until the numbers on the counter read 0000. And then he flicked the play knob and both reels began to turn. A voice burst from the speakers, crisp and clear. This is National Public Radio. I'm Leanne Hansen. If you're hearing this, you should be aware that this will be the final broadcast from our studios. There are only a few engineers left who are able to keep the system up and running, and the power is failing all around us. The worldwide pandemic has reached a critical point. The last reports received at this agency from various points around the globe indicate that the Earth has suffered a new extinction event, this time only affecting humanity. All other life seems to be immune to the virus that's been ravaging the population on all continents, including the high Arctic and the Antarctic research stations. No place on the planet has escaped the effects of the virus, originally thought to be spread by birds. In fact, we know now that a U.S. government-sponsored program to help immunize human populations against such a contagion seems to be the actual cause of the pandemic, although we don't know precisely why or how. What began as a simple test spreading an airborne vaccine has resulted in the fall of our species. All major metropolitan areas have shut down. The United States government yesterday morning issued a statement on the few remaining emergency broadcast networks, effectively dissolving the federal government and releasing all power to any local agencies still functioning. Governments around the world have followed suit. The situation is grim. With electrical power beginning to fail, people are urged to assess their situations carefully. Food and safe drinking water are your most important concerns. The announcer continued to perform her final task with efficiency and courage. She outlined what people would need to do to survive, but she had to be quick. Already the signal was fading. She ended with the following words. While there is little reason for hope, we do know that the Centers for Disease Control have set up emergency headquarters in the last part of North America to be affected by the virus, Eastern Maine and the Canadian Maritimes. With the last remaining experts focusing on ways to combat this virus, we can only hope that they discover a way for humans to survive. This is Leanne Hansen. Goodbye and good luck. The tape kept turning, but no sound issued from the speakers. We were the last place on Earth to be infected. We survived longer than the rest, said Brady. That brings little comfort, Kaylee said. I was there while they fought to solve the puzzle. All the scientists and soldiers died except for Dr. Grindle. Dr. Grindle? Isn't he the scientist whose program started the whole damn thing? Joe inquired. I guess, answered Kaylee. All I know is he was a fairly decent guy, and then he went insane and tried to kill me over and over again. Joe commented. He must have been under a lot of pressure. I mean, he's responsible for all of it. It was a mistake. The program meant to save millions of lives, even in parts of the world with no roads or hospitals. It was a good idea. Hell, it was a great idea. I wish I knew what went wrong. Imagine knowing that you murdered the world. Must have driven him over the edge. He's a monster, said Brady. A real monster. No doubt, answered Joe. Yes, he was a monster, she quietly agreed. He wasn't, to begin with, but he turned into something else. Something changed him. No, really, he was a monster with claws and fangs and a spike coming out of his back, Brady insisted. They did not pay him any heed. Joe asked them 1,000 questions about their recent past. He was amazed when he hobbled out to the Life Seeker and saw the collection of tools, supplies, and modifications that Brady had previously made to the vehicle. He was especially excited about the four-wheelers on the trailer, claiming that he'd love to take a spin on one of those. After a prolonged discussion around the back deck and lots of iced tea, Joe began to speak of his past and how his journey had brought him here. Where Kaylee and Brady had battled elemental forces, Joe had spent quiet hours pondering his short future. He had spent hours and days on the radio trying to find anyone on the receiving end. It was his only method of contact with the rest of the world. How many hours did he spend going from one frequency to another, seeking anyone at all? Meanwhile, his supply of insulin grew smaller every day. He felt lightheaded, followed by chills and hot flashes, and he knew his sugar level was spiraling out of control. He lay for long hours in bed in the morning, sleeping deeply and falling farther into his own illness. Funny, he told them, I didn't die from the virus. Was it because I had been exposed to it or because I was immune? And if I was immune, how? And as he sat there talking to them, he pondered the weight of his own mortality. If they were going to survive, Brady and Kaylee had a lot to learn. They had to do more than live off the detritus of civilization. They had to do more than survive. They had to thrive. Kaylee, when I went to bed, just before you found me, I didn't expect to wake up. I took a small injection of insulin, said my prayers in the dark, and I passed out. When you awoke me, I thought I was waking up in another world and you were some kind of angel. Hey, can I call you Angel, Kaylee? Asked Brady. Do that and you'll be waking up in another world, she replied. Joe let go a laugh. Night was falling, and soon they would speak through the darkness to the other side of the world, reaching out an invisible hand into the ether, hoping someone, somewhere, would grasp it. End of chapter.